Welcome, everybody. I'm Pat Montuore, your host of On Your Honor Straight Talk. Today's show is going to be a deeper dive into law enforcement PTSD, PTS, and call fatigue. The word call fatigue is something that we personally came up with, officers, and we'll describe that later on in our show. We have three amazing guests for us today, two in our studio that have a well-diverse background with relationships to mental health, how it affects our officers, how it affects you during your patrolling and after, what goes on in your retirement, and other health risks related to that. Also, the most serious of officers dying by their own hand, suicide. More about that later as we start to talk about our sponsor right now, and that's the Police Unity Tour. The Police Unity Tour sponsors this show for the educational purposes for our viewers to allow them to understand that there is more to an officer going to a call or retiring or having a successful career. Those careers are interrupted by their actions of being killed in the line of duty, dealing with, like I said earlier, call fatigue, not being able to release those amount of stressors that are in themselves, the stigma that is behind law enforcement thinking that they can ask for help without having something drastic that people would say they're not competent. But those things are absolutely untrue, and we're going to be finding more about that as this show goes on. The most important thing is the Police and Unity Tour wants to make sure that we don't commit the same mistakes moving forward and that we are able to save officer lives. Wellness and safety of our officers is paramount. And how do we do so? Do we talk to the Chiefs Association, federal agencies? How do we go about making sure it's mandated and not create stigma for our law enforcement when they have to go to court and talk about what took place and someone could use this against them, him or her? It is very important for us all to realize that the jobs that we have some real, stigmas to them, whether it happens to be law enforcement or many of the other jobs that are out there. One stigma shouldn't be is how do we take care of our mind and our well-being? Because without that, your health is at a risk, and so are the people around you. And before we get even deeper into this and see our guests, I'm so excited about having them here today, I would like to take us to our tradition, our honor roll. And our honor roll is an understanding, explanation, and what happens to our law enforcement officers when they die in the line of duty to this very date. With us today in the office at the Police Unity Tour, we're welcoming Eric Heller, our technical communications manager. He works for the Police Unity Tour and assists us in making sure you, the viewers, understand why we ride for those who died, how we help those who ride, and also how we help everyone out there understand who we are. Eric, would you please give us the honor and tell us who sacrificed their lives for us all today to make us safer with the rule of law? Thank you. Welcome, Eric.
Sure, Pat. How are you? Thanks for having me on again. I appreciate it. So we use the National Law Enforcement Officer Memorial statistics. We take their statistics right from their website, and we dissect them and look at the numbers, the increases and decreases from year to date. So the first thing we look at are firearms-related incidents, and in 2022, there are currently 58 firearms-related incidents, officers killed in the line of duty. Last year in 2021, again, to date, there were 54. So that's a 7% increase from last year. Traffic-related incidents, in 2022, there are 50. In 2021, there were 52. So that's a 4% decrease from last year. The problem with this is that it's actually, if we look at last month's, it's a 19% increase just from last month. The deaths for other reasons, and most of the time this is medical, and we'll see those numbers shortly. In 2022, it's 91, and to date in 2021, there were 353. And as I've said before, this is mostly due to COVID in the previous years. So that's a 74% decrease, which is obviously great numbers. But again, it's an 18% increase just from last month for 2022. The total deaths in 2022 are currently 199, and in 2021, there were 459. Again, it's a great decrease of 57%, mostly due to COVID. It's a 23% total increase in just 1 month. We put all these names on on the wall every year, 23,229 right now. It continues to grow, it keeps going, and if we can, we know we'll never get to zero, but obviously if we can continue to get decreases like some of these numbers, that's obviously our goal.
And Eric, hearing some of the statistics related to, increases month to month, some people may not realize what that is or how that it affects law enforcement. That's considerable. We should be seeing decreases based on the education, based on the knowledge and understanding we're taking care of our citizens, and sometimes that doesn't occur. And I believe it's not at the fault of our citizens not knowing, it's the media doesn't portray or give the actual statistics or a continual statistic analysis of what goes on in the law enforcement field. It unfairly represents who we are, and therefore as we start to grow as law enforcement or understanding what our needs are, sometimes it's too late. And it's too late when you have to read those numbers. But I also wanted to, compliment you that I know you're working very hardly on a website, actually a redesign. When do you think that that's going to be up for our viewers to see? And, tell us a little bit about it briefly.
It actually is live. It went live 2 days ago.
Oh, wonderful.
Kind of a soft grand opening, if you will. We haven't advertised yet. There's a couple tweaks here and there that I'm still working on. But it's there. It's got some great stuff. It's got videos. It's got overview videos. It's got the links to the National Law Enforcement Officer Memorial. So you can get those numbers and that information and that education that you talked about, right from the source. We also have our Facebook and Instagram. So On Your Honor has its own Facebook and Instagram. It's On Your Honor RVN on both Facebook and Instagram. Police Unity Tour National Chapter has its own Facebook. Chapter 1, Facebook and Instagram. So, check us out on all those. Again, you'll get right from the source statistics and information and education. And that's our primary goal, is the awareness and education regarding law enforcement officers killed in the line of duty.
That's amazing. Thank you very much for that. I also want to give a plug to our Executive Director, Harry Phillips, and also Chris Jasek, and yourself in the office. For this is going to be hectic for you moving forward as we start collecting part 2 from applications, and we have people still interested in going and making sure that this May is going to be bigger and better than ever. So with that, I'd like to also thank all the chapters that we have that represent us, 9 chapters, and I just wanted to say thank you to all the leadership that makes that possible. So again, thank you to our Executive Director, as well as you, Eric, and Chris Jasek, for all the extra work that you do for us. Thank you very much, and thank you for being on the show once again. This is obviously a tradition that we're going to continue to go on, so we'll see you next week.
Great, thank you.
With that being said, I would like to say I'm so excited about our next guests. We have 2. We have a federal law enforcement officer, and we have a doctor with us today. Let's talk about our federal agent. It's Jon Adler. We have him back, as I said we would. Jon Adler has a very extensive career, but I want to be able to make sure I read it because he warned me he wanted me to shorten it. So it is my honor to welcome him, and before we do, I want to just represent him by reading some things off. He currently is the president of the Federal Law Enforcement Officers Foundation. He's a retired Chief Tactical Training Officer with the U.S. Attorney's Office in SDNY, Southern District. More recently, Jon is a former director of the Department of Justice, Bureau of Justice, the BGA. And let me tell you the importance of that. It's appointed by our President of the United States. You just don't get that opportunity to go there if you don't have the credentials and you don't put in the time outside of a normal day or a normal job. I'm so proud that he's on this show. Assistance for the BGA as well, which they oversee police programs addressing officers' mental wellness and suicide. They create the opportunity for people to receive grants in law enforcement and educationally for us to further our ability. So if we don't have the monies budgetarily, agencies like the BGA are capable and able, under the direction of the director like Jon, to be able to give us those monies to help us. He's also been on this show once before and will be on it again, and he's going to continue to be a co-host with me, and I'm so honored. And I'll welcome him in 2 seconds because we have 2 guests here. Our next guest is a very good friend and someone that's helped me personally and has helped many, many officers in their careers. And also with, time frame where it's not an 8 to 4 or a 9 to 5 kind of ordeal. It's on weekends, middle of the night, and I can express for, I've called them very deep in the early evening for assistance for myself. It is my great pleasure to introduce to you Dr. Peter Killeen. He has a doctorate in counseling psychology, a master's in theology studies, a police therapist, psychotherapist with the Port Authority of New York, New Jersey. Peter also was a big part of 9/11, and I could also say for myself and John and Peter are all rescue workers and people that were on the scene to be able to see the damage and mental damage that it has done not only to law enforcement and fire and emergency services, but for many of those out there of people who just gave themselves to be there. Peter also co-authored 5 books, I'm saying 5 books based on helping us, law enforcement. Peter's operational longevity textbook works in tandem with the operational longevity and personal journals. I will assure you that we will have Peter back on the show specifically to talk about him, because I use and have read his most recent completion of Operation Longevity Mediation, along with the 21-day call to action coin. And that's something that I want all of us to be able to take a look at. There are many exercises in the life of law enforcement, whether it's going to in-service classes, whether it's your initial academies, whether it's studying for leadership. But this is what you should be studying from the day you get off or out of a car and go back into headquarters for your first shift. You should be able to say that I'm able to breathe, I'm able to understand, I'm able to acknowledge, and I'm able to make some sort of action after that. It is with my great pleasure that I introduce to you the audience, Peter Killeen and Jon Adler. Welcome, brothers. And I told you, I told you that earlier on, that for our viewers that Jon was on the show prior, and I couldn't wait to get you on the show as well, Peter. But with that being said, it seems to be that law enforcement, and the community of law enforcement kind of pushes themselves away from having diagnosis of PTSD, PTS, until after they're retired and they realize that why they're not sleeping and why there's not, interruptions of sorts. But, Jon, as a federal agent, do you think that that is a stigma that you may have held or others in your area of law enforcement and who you've dealt with when you talk about, when I say to you PTSD, or I feel stressed, or I'm suffering with some sort of depression? When I say that to you, I get a pit in my stomach knowing that people are going to label me.
Right.
Is that accurate, Jon?
It is. From someone who spent most of his law enforcement career in New York, you'd hear terms like the rubber gun squad, and that would refer to somebody who was on modified duty or limited assignment, and it could be for a variety of reasons. But in terms of the mental health arena, absolutely. It was like you were a taboo. And I'm glad that my good friend is sitting here, because I think back to the old American Express commercial, "Don't leave home without it." Well, now I'm here to tell everyone, right? I think you mentioned I was a tactical training instructor.
Yeah.
Tough macho guy, right? Don't leave home without him. And I learned that, and that's why he's here on the couch, by the way, because Pat knows I get a little nutty. So having my friend, the good Dr. Peter here, will keep me calm. But I'm telling you, think of it as if you take a champagne cork and you put it on top of a volcano, what do you think, where's the lava going to go? So if you equate that volcano to our mind, our body, our soul, and you cap it and there is no release, that lava is going to run up, down, sideways, your gluteus abundance. You're going to get your ass kicked.
Yeah.
And it is very unpleasant. But to your point, Pat, I think the culture has evolved. We had that Neanderthal perception in the past that if you had a psychological, mental wound, there was something wrong with you. Get back, you have the plague. Now we're finally evolving to the point where those wounds are badges of honor. And you got to come forward and get the help, because you can't keep the volcano bottled up forever.
I couldn't agree more. And Doc, if I may, you also are involved in mediation issues with departments, being able to deal with, and seeing issues on the early onset, and then also maybe expressing that that person needs help, and then seeing, these onsets of, the disabilities of it, the mental illness, the depression, and all the other things. Do you agree that there's stigma out there that keep people from from seeing you and realizing that it's something important, and you're there firsthand on it. You respond to us now. You save us. So in your perspective.
Well, I think what Jon said was it's evolving. And I think today people are more open to getting the help that they need. We still have a long ways to go. And I think the stigma it's become somewhat ubiquitous. We're talking about it more. But Jon came up with this slogan, "Smash Stigma, Save Lives," and it's become, he's wearing the little band there, it's been utilized by other people, right? And they're picking it up. And it's such an easy and simple term to remember, but we still have a ways to go with that and identifying with people, especially administrators on the job, the executive staff. They have to understand that you can't keep saying to people, you need to get the help that you need to get the help. And then when they get the help, then all of a sudden it's turned against them. We need very clearly defined lines of communication to say, if you get help, we're going to be there to support you. But also we want the unions on board as well. I work with the unions. So my life, I've been working with them for 33 years now, and I've seen a change. I've seen that we are changing in our culture and the perspective. The younger people today that are coming on the job are very, very much more open to getting the help because many of them have been in therapy themselves, and for them, I'm going to my shrink is not a big thing, where the people from a few years back, and then you used 9/11 as a point of reference, Pat. That was a defining moment and changed the perspective of the culture, where people getting the help that they need. And the strongest of people, I saw it myself. All of a sudden, they were brought to their knees because they couldn't cope, and they didn't even know what the heck was going on with them. But that's how powerful trauma is on the brain. And I learned a great deal post 9/11 as well, and I saw what it did to me physically in terms of developing, a cancer as a result of that. But we have a lot of, we have a lot more to learn and a lot more to engage in, but I'm hopeful that we're getting there. We're making some steps, and just when I think we're moving in the right direction, something happened. I'm like, don't they get this? But and that was the purpose of the books, was to educate people on resiliency, mindfulness, and using meditation in the training. And I introduced that very early on before anybody else was doing it. But I said, this is going to work. And I did it on the federal level down at FLETC and as well as Port Authority. So.
And I think you write it in a language, too, not to interrupt you. You wrote it in a language from a perspective, and I failed to say that you were a former Port Authority police officer. And I wanted to save that for a perspective for the audience to see that you were able to take a look at it from boots on the ground, and then all of a sudden the administrative aspect, and then all of a sudden educated and turned around and looked at yourself, right, in some sort of looking into the past on how you could have done better for yourself and how you could have done better for your partners. And mental health is a reality of what we go through. And just because a law enforcement officer is emotional or has characteristics of saying, hey, look, my filter, or I'm full, the board's bending, I don't want it to break. Right. And then all of a sudden you face the stigmas. But I think that you bring some, and your books show it, you bring the law enforcement perspective in the language we understand, whether it represents challenge coin, mediation. People confuse it with just breathing or a culture, right? We got to take a look at it that even when you work out with weights, you breathe. When you're running, your breath. Everything we do in life plays a role through what? The breath of air, right? So we can control it in the ways that you say it, we'd be better off. But I want to break us out right at that point right now, because we're going to be going to a commercial, and we'll be right back when we have both our guests discuss on what call fatigue is, or what I think call fatigue is. We'll be right back. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Bob Hochgertle from Kings Road Brewing Company. I'm here to tell you about a brand new show on RVN television called Cooking with the King. Each week, we're going to taste and sample some of the best beers the Kings Road Brewing Company has to offer. And we're going to talk to area chefs and restaurant owners as we pair our beer with their signature dishes. We're going to teach you how to cook and eat like a king. Cheers.
A stroke can be easy to detect. A loved one can't speak, perhaps they can't move. But there's another sign of a stroke that many of us can't see. It's called spatial neglect, and it can occur during or after a stroke, causing distorted visual movements. Fortunately, there's a solution by using optical prism technology during rehabilitation. If you or a loved one have experienced a stroke, ask your doctor about spatial neglect. Spatial neglect. See the whole picture at KesslerFoundation.org.
Welcome back, everybody, and our guests, Peter Killeen and Jon Adler, their expertise and their ability to help us understand mental health, where it takes us, what happens to our law enforcement men and women, and how it's structured and what the stigmas are around it. But I do want to take us into something back into the moment when we talked earlier with regards to what call fatigue is. We just heard earlier from the doctor about, certain parts of his book and mediation and certain things of being able to release. And that's a thing, is I've served almost 3 decades of law enforcement, and coming home, what's the first thing you want to do is not be doing what you were doing for the last 12 or 14 hours. And with that being said, where does the release go? You end up fibbing to your family in a sense by telling them that everything is okay, even if it's something small. And I always thought of everybody saying that you're always fatigued when you're doing certain things, and why can't you be fatigued based on the calls that you see? Because they do, Doc, right? They do get to be a part of where it's that board bending. And where does it get to where you could actually talk to somebody other than another law enforcement officer and say, this is what I'm experiencing, and then be afraid not to talk too much about it, because then they'll go to administration saying this person should have went to some sort of therapist. Right. And then all of a sudden, you hear rubber gun squad. You hear, I don't have the ability to be a law enforcement officer, and all I'm doing is serving people. So do you think that call fatigue is something that should be discussed as early as first weeks of the police academy for our young law enforcement officers, whether it happens to be sheriff? I'm talking about the 900,000 law enforcement officers, from federal to boots on the ground law enforcement officers in their cars.
Well, quite honestly, today was the first time I heard that terminology, call fatigue. So I'm not quite sure if you can explain it or John can explain it, what call fatigue is.
Well, I'm sorry I didn't actually do that. I mean, yeah, John, why don't you give a crack at what we discussed?
Yeah, I'm an expert at fatigue. I equate that to being punch drunk. Call fatigue is you're in the grind, and it's one call after another after another. It's the Charlie Chaplin pipeline of calls to respond to various crimes.
Okay.
And I think the fatigue it's the mental fatigue, the emotional fatigue you get from being bombarded by an unrelenting number of calls for service.
And that's exactly right. Again, when you're talking and you're coming up with terms, this probably has an adage or some sort of definition to it. When I say call fatigue, it could be just couched by just being stressful, or a crisis incident, took over the day. But we do see a lot of in the line of duty deaths, John, and you could attest to this as being, a vice chair and a chair of the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial, extensive career on making sure, that our officer are remembered for dying in the line of duty. But you've been involved in the names committee when you're with the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial, and you understand that you'll hear these in the line of duty death cases where someone has a heart attack. Was it because it called 24 hours ago, or there's all these stipulations. So that's where I came up with. I sat on it as a previous executive director of the National Law Enforcement Memorial. I served with the National Law Enforcement Memorial for over 6 years. I had the opportunity for several years to be the executive director, and then taking a look at it from not serving the public as I used to in my previous role, but serving law enforcement now and trying to define characteristics that are specific to, why officers have heart attacks. And why is there a questionability if that person is in his uniform, has a heart attack? There's got to be some reason why. We should be taken care of and physically fit, and we have all these opportunities, and this is why you both are on this show. We don't do what people think we do. They think we're the most fit because someone's telling us we're supposed to get physical checkups, mental checkups with doctors. That doesn't happen. It doesn't happen. It only happens when you make a mistake. Right. And I want to be truthful that, when you make the mistake, it's too late. And earlier, when I shot it over to the doc, we're talking about first level going into our police academies. I wasn't trying to stump you by call fatigue. I was trying to say it in a sense that from the way I understand it, and that you could take a look at it from a 30,000-foot level and take a look at it from being the officer to now being the person who could administrate and give the hope and the help. And you've done that to me. You've done that to many, and I'm very thankful for the guidance you've given me. You talked about 9/11 earlier. That was call fatigue in my mind. That immediately I got there and said, how and why is this place, or why does it look like this on our own soil? This doesn't happen here,
Right.
And that was the immediate mental fatigue for me, and it stayed there, and it's 20 years.
But I think that's the human condition, though. I think we remember those poignant memories and times in our life, and it's like it happened yesterday, But I think, and I'm glad about this call fatigue, and I like the terminology that you all brought to the table here, because I think there's a lot of truth and validity to it, and I think we often forget cumulative stress.
Yes.
And you may, for 20 years, do your job, or 15 years do your job quite effectively, and then this one final call that you had to go on, that's what hit you. That's where the complex trauma comes into play, that you're burned out, you don't realize, and people don't realize that we're in an epidemic of burnout today in society, in law enforcement, because of the contempt for law enforcement today that people have. How do you feel about going out on a call when you're going to people that don't like you or don't care about what you do, and but you still have to be effective in your job, right? So it's one of those things that we're certainly in a, I don't know, in a system right now, like a bad weather system, that we haven't come out to the other side yet. I think that pendulum will swing back, because they're going to recognize that we need law enforcement, right? We can't do it without them. But I think it's going to be a while before we get to the other side. And that's where that fatigue comes in, I think. And that was so aptly put, that you get these calls one after another, and you're not even quite sure if people appreciate what you do.
Yes.
And you can't keep buying people off with money and salaries. Sooner or later, the spirit has to be assuaged on some level, and you have to feel good about what you do. I know a lot of people that say, I tell my kids, you're not going into law enforcement. You'll never be a cop. Find something else to do. And when did that happen? So there have been many defining moments in our history in law enforcement, and you guys have been around a long time as well, that you saw the culture change. And again, I don't mean to use 9/11 as a specific time, but that began the change of what we were doing and the way we looked at law enforcement. And I think we're in one of those periods right now because of the culture. But that will change, I think. It'll come back.
We can only hope so, and I think that was really well put, and it also adds to, again, the death toll of law enforcement. I'm going to continue to hound on that topic, because it's absolutely certain from the perspective that I used to sit in, and statistically being able to look at case after case after case after case, and you see, was this person afraid when they were going to this call? What happened at this call? Because if you pull your gun, if you do something that you're not supposed to do, if you act in an aggression, and that's from your tactical experience that you've taught many things, you want to make sure that you're safe. You want all the areas that you tell your officers.
I would be arrested for what I taught new agents in the academy before 9/11. If I taught them today what I taught them back then, I would be arrested. Because I told them back then, excuse me, something as simple as you don't need to see a firearm pointed in your face to defend yourself. And you will take the necessary level, or you will use the necessary level of force to defend yourself. And if someone who is fully intended, Dr. Hannibal Lecter, to pull out your innards and eat you for dinner, if you're going to sit back and contemplate a less lethal option, you are going to die. But now, as Dr. Peter said, unfortunately, the landscape has changed. The expectation has changed. You now have to be a full contact MMA ground fighter to seize control over a very hostile, aggressive, potentially lethal suspect, or suspects plural. It's a new landscape. Yeah. We have to adapt to it. But you're right, the expectation is unbelievable. You know, when you hear things like they'll say, well, law enforcement is inherently racist. Law enforcement is inherently human. Police officers, inherently human. Human beings. Uniform doesn't change it, a shield doesn't change it. You're a human being. And we're all imperfect, but honorable, much like your show, and try our best. That's the critical thing to fall back on. Be honorable, have integrity, but the expectation, a police officer does not get paid to get killed. No one gets hired into law enforcement, and in your job description it says, if called upon, you will die. No, you will accept risks, you will accept danger. You will put your life on the line, but you don't get paid to die. That is a consequence of some homicidal piece of shit's action, but you don't get paid to die. You get paid to defend, and there's a big difference.
And you know what? You were going in the direction in my mind. I'm trying to say to myself, I hope I remember to say this. I hope I remember to say this. You know what didn't change? Us willingly going to a call knowing that we can die. Right. Us willingly putting the belt on and the badge every single day, or your work week, however it is today, and knowing that people out there will hurt you. You're still going to go to their home, and you're still going to give them everything you have. So when I hear the word racist or bias, I don't see bias and racist in us going out each and every day knowing that we could die to protect the citizens that we love, a matter of fact that we love. And having the opportunity of being on the police unity tour and going through many states, when they see law enforcement officers on bicycles, knowing that what they're riding, what they're doing, I see a lot of people supporting us. There are a lot of people out there that have a bigger say when they're in the media, or they're a politician that feels like they want to spread wherever the flow of what's going on out there. But I don't really give a shit about that. What I give a shit about is that the truth of what law enforcement endures, the rigors of their job, how we can defeat that with Dr. Peter Killeen and many of his colleagues. What is the most important way do we defeat this word that everybody thinks is ugly, suicide, which we're going to be talking about now? And I find myself even getting goosebumps bringing it up, because I look and think about how many people that we personally know that committed suicide, and everybody wants to hide it. They think that it's such a black label, even to the family. How'd this happen? That people want to make excuses for it. I don't. I think that it's our obligation to identify it, investigate it, and not condemn it, but educate, because you have to be really seriously ill or something going on with you to make sure that you go through taking your life. And there's got to be better opportunities when this world is able and capable of going all around our entire planet, helping everybody else. But all we want is reform. If we talk about reform in law enforcement, gentlemen, reform should come with education. It should come with doctor and mental health, because there's nothing more important than the human mind. Mm-hmm. If you're not wrapped tight, okay, as my father would say when I was a kid, or you're missing a few cards in your deck, you need to get help. Right. You need to go out there and realize that you have something going on. It doesn't mean you're broken. I've realized that personally. It's okay to say you go to therapy. It's okay. It's not something that condemns you. It doesn't make you bad. You know what it makes you? Proud, honorable, truthful, and understanding of your own wellness. You know, I'm 0 for 2 on heart attacks. And what is that from? I don't know. Is it from the sausage that I eat and the cheese and running from job to job and doing all the different things? I don't know, but I will tell you right now, You don't sweat through your clothes because there's not something going on that's strange. You don't cry after a job and you don't even realize why a tear, because you're not crying like a normal person. A tear comes out of your eye. You don't know why. Those are mental disruptions. And in fact, they happen to me, they happen to you, they happen to you, they happen to every person. You don't have to be a law enforcement officer. If people can't say in their lives that after we've been through 9/11, we've been through all these world crises around us, and now COVID, and everything is blamed on COVID, I think, as Doc said earlier, that we started going in directions of seeing things that we've never seen before after 9/11. And I don't think anybody could say, and even in the earlier bombing of the World Trade Center, or something of so pillar that we see those pictures of those two buildings, I still see them in my mind. It represented America in so many ways, especially in this area. But one thing I didn't realize is how it affected the entire planet. When you were there, everybody wanted to be there. Everybody wanted to help. Everybody wanted to say that they were a part of making sure that this country stayed the way it should be. And that was the honor and the respect. My question to both of you, and we're going to be wrapping it up in a second, with questions as we go towards our conclusion. But I want to say, the most important thing in life is mental health, wellness. How do we get there?
The next step, we talk about smash stigma. I think we've gotten to the point where we now need to elevate to the bosses, to the employers, the chiefs, the sheriffs, the directors, the marshals, the inspectors. They have to work with the union, collectively set up a program for your department that's confidential and credible. If the department does it alone, it has no credibility, none. I saw we lost 3 Border Patrol agents to suicide last month, and the agency puts out a statement, CBP has expanded the number of on-site clinicians, blah, 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 blah. Together, these licensed professionals implement an evidence-based suicide prevention, and you read this, you want to commit suicide. This is not what we need. Now, if they took 2 minutes instead of spending all that money, get a masseuse. It'd bring more value. Give me a massage. But talk to him, the person who understands the rank and file. Bring him in. Let the union have a voice, negotiate, work together with the department, and hire the right program and build the right program. So when someone comes forward, it doesn't mean your career is over. It means you have a chance to get well and be fit for duty. That's what we need to do.
The problem I see is just what you read. Everybody thinks if you cover your ass by writing something that you've done, I like to see action. I want to hear about it after it's already happened. I don't want somebody to tell me about it. I want to see immediately that those families are taken care of, because you know who also serves with a law enforcement officer? Their entire family.
That's right.
You know when a law enforcement dies, the whole family dies with that person. It's not just that person that is, oh God, they're gone, and then we move on to the next show or next topic or the next program or the next call. The thing that I want this show to represent, and I'm so thankful that the Police Unity Tour has sponsored this show, is I want it to represent the truth. And straight talk is exactly what we're talking about. And on your honor, that makes you have respect, dignity. And that's where that word came from. If people want to know where this was developed and why it was developed, it's because early on, when we started with the Police Unity Tour, we wanted to save lives because we were hearing so much about death, and it's always death in our field in law enforcement. Death, 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 death every day, right? You see someone dying or committing suicide or getting injured, losing their job, something happening. You want to know that early on that, organizations like the Police Unity Tour, and Harry Phillips was a part of his initiatives early on. We drive on the cheapest tires. They're out to bid. It's not so much like you're driving on, Rolls-Royce tires or Porsche tires and you're on a track. And yeah, they teach us, they train us, because why? We've done something that happened or someone died or a lawsuit became of it. We could be more proactive. We put people on the moon. We do all kinds of crazy shit in this world. Why aren't we supporting our men and women of law enforcement? And shame on anybody in the area of our political bodies if you don't see the merit in this show and what we're trying to tell you as seasoned officers. And I tell you all officers that are out there today active, and all the officers that are retired, that we have an obligation to each other to educate, to tell people what happens to us, the effects of it, statistically, emotionally, mentally, and what happens to our families. I want to thank our guests and tell you it's been an honor. And obviously, Jon, you're going to be back on the show. But Peter, I want you back on our show. I want to go really deep into certain things. I want to pull stuff out of your mind so our viewers get the opportunity to hear from somebody who's served on both sides of the aisle. And I'm talking about our aisle. Somebody in administrative, somebody that's a psychologist, somebody that's here to analyze us, but also wore the shoes and walked the beat. And that's you. And I wanted to say thank you again for what you've directed me in my life. And I'm not ashamed to say it. I'm appreciative that you've given me an opportunity. I have a second chance on life after a heart attack. But I also want to say thank you for getting me out of a tough time in my life. And I'm very appreciative for that. And with that, it brings me to our closings, ladies and gentlemen. And the most important part of our show is to say thank you to all our viewers. Thank you to the people who want to become a part of the Police Unity Tour and our sponsors. But most of all, we have representation at the end of our show today from Alita Montuore. She has a rendition of a song that she had sung in reference to all our fallen officers, those of mental illness, of suicide by the hands of others, or what we've heard from our office, from Eric Heller, of why our officers died. This song was put in place for that. Please take the opportunity to hit our QR code at the end. Be a part of our organization in any way you can, whether it's by messaging, watching this show, being a part as a rider or support. Please, everyone, when you're out there, be safe. And I say to you, every show at the end, stay blue. God bless you. And remember, on your honor, Straight Talk is for you. Thank you.
I need the kind of love that can outlast this life. I need the kind of love that is willing to fight.